Hey everybody, it's Tim Guy here to do a video analysis on the video about Mr. Hester and his classroom. Just a couple of those questions that we're supposed to answer, just some of my thoughts about what I saw in the video and some of the things that kind of inspired me through it. So one of the things we were supposed to talk about is a little bit about his classroom management style and what are some of the things that he did to really reach some of these students that were underprivileged in his school district. He qualified what the article talked about being authoritative, not authoritarian. Those two words are interchangeable, kind of confuse me a little bit because they sound very similar. But the authoritative person is strict and has set rules and follows those rules and makes sure students follow them, but they don't do it in a manner where they kind of force students to do things. They earn respect from the students. They build relationships with the students. It's a lot different than the authoritarian style where you kind of say, this is the rules, this is how it works, I don't really care what you have to say. The authoritative takes some of the students into account, and that's really what he did. He kind of looked at the group of students that he had, and they felt like they had input in his classroom, but at the same time he had strict rules and a level of respect that he built with them through being consistent with his classroom management. As I said, he made a lot of rules and enforced them consistently. From the first day, he told them, here's my expectations. They're extremely clear, and this is what I want you to follow as you're in my classroom. And that kind of built sort of an accountability system with these students that wouldn't normally be there. He also set very high expectations for his students. He did not kind of say, oh, well, these are low-income students, probably not going to go to college. Whatever I can get from them is good enough. He said to every single one of his students, you are going to go to college. This is what I expect from you. And setting those high expectations kind of set the bar for students that he cared about them. He was going to do whatever it took to make them succeed, and he was not going to let them off the hook. And with those kind of consistent rules and with that kind of relationship building, all of that kind of mixed together to make his classroom kind of soar above what could happen in a sort of situation with that kind of group of students. And the biggest thing was that he never yelled. He talked about how in his first year of teaching he yelled and it kind of didn't work out well for him. He didn't yell, and he built very healthy relationships with his students. And he made sure that he kind of had a personal connection with a lot of students. He talked about their interests and things. And I think that all of those things are really important in terms of building those relationships, setting up those kind of ground rules, and building respect between your students and looking at that. One of the questions we're also supposed to kind of look at is his with itness. Like the way I kind of took that was, how much does he really think about the cultural connection with his students? In the article that we had to read, they talked about how one of the important things to being a authoritative teacher instead of authoritarian is that they kind of take the cultural norms into account when they look at kind of their group of students and take that into account in their classroom management. And some of the things that I saw, even beyond classroom management, some of this will come in later when we talk about his instruction, was he used a lot of rhythm and noise in his room, kind of music sort of things, and things that the students might have more of a connection with than just kind of the simple everyday let's take notes and that sort of thing. He also talked a lot about being fair with his students and making sure that his expectations were not over the top, but they were fair, and the students knew right off the bat, this is the expectation and this is what the consequence is for that. And that helped build some real bonds with his students by making sure they were fair, knowing that he cared about them. He also talked about being really authentic with his students, and that was something in the article that they said was extremely important. They gave some examples from their study where the teacher would share information about themselves, talk about like their grandmother and different things. And from the video, you could tell that he was extremely authentic with his students. The one girl talked about how he seemed like a nice guy, and then he shared information about himself and really shared that he connected and that he cared with those students. So, and I think that that's really important, really, is the authenticness. Some of that article that we read talked about how being culturally sensitive to students, but I always get sort of concerned with that because I think that you want to be yourself. I am not somebody who, when I look at my students who maybe come from an inner city background or are interested in certain things, I'm not going to fake a connection with them that's not really there. I'm not into some of the music that they listen to. I'm not into, and I never experienced some of the cultural things that they have. I can respect those things, but to me, what I do is I try to find a connection with those students that I do have and not make up ones that don't exist. So I have a lot of students this year, especially, who are really into basketball, and that's something I really like sports, so I can build that connection with them. Whereas when they're talking about their favorite rappers or other things that they're into, I'm not going to fake a relationship there, but I might share some things that I'm interested in that same realm. And then the other thing too is that he sort of built in sort of the increased achievement with his students. He really kind of talked about how, hey, you guys are going to do better. I'm going to show you how to do better, and that kind of shows his kind of connection with them. In terms of using the target instruction, we could really see a variety of instruction just in the little brief video that we saw. He had music going on. He used rhythm in terms of like them shutting their binders and different things. He showed them taking notes. He had them working in groups. There were just a lot of different varieties of instructions that were going on and varieties of tasks that help keep students engaged throughout his classroom. He also put a lot of ownership on the students. And he consistently throughout the video talked about having high expectations and telling them that this is my expectation for you. This is why I'm putting this expectation on you. So really the first two parts, the target, the task, and the authority, we saw a lot of during the video. We also saw he was showing a presentation. I think he was showing the students what their achievement was and how they were doing better on certain tests through what was going on in his classroom. Which I took as a example of his kind of praise of their effort and showing them this is the fruits of your labor here, and that's sort of that R part of target, the recognition. And then finally, he showed different groupings throughout the period. He had them in rows when he was doing sort of more of a direct instruction part, it looked like, and then he had them in pairs during the video, and I saw that for grouping. The other parts of target I couldn't necessarily see throughout the video. Obviously, it was very short and it was more focused on a lot of the classroom management pieces, but those are some of the things I picked out that did fit those different parts of target. And, really the connection between his instruction and management, I really think those things are so intertwined and connected. And he was able to kind of connect them together because of his high expectations for his students and his fair and reasonable expectations for them. This is what I expect, and this is what the consequence is if you don't meet those. He had full buy-in from his students. At least in the video, obviously we don't perfectly know what's going on, but it seemed like all the students were willing to buy in, and that's going to totally change what kind of instruction you can do. If you have students who are totally willing to buy in and say, hey, you're going to take me to the promised land here, I know that you care about me, and I know that what you do is going to be helpful and effective for me, you can kind of do whatever you want with those students. And part of that is that his instruction did not leave those students bored. He had a lot of different things going on, as we kind of said in the T part of Target, where he had rhythm and music, and the girl was talking about how she thought it was weird at first, but then later she kind of liked the sort of change in pace. And, back in the article, in the Bondi article, they talked about how if your instruction leaves students bored, that can tend to lead to more disruptions in the room. So he really kind of avoided that management issue by having engaging instruction. And then again, with his grouping, he changed his group based on the kind of instruction he was doing. So during a direct instruction component, he kind of had the students more in rows where they wouldn't be as tempted to talk to each other because they're not right next to each other. And then he had them move into groups when it looked like they were doing some sort of independent work. And that's when he wants them talking to each other so they can give each other help and kind of get more engaged in the work with each other. And, these are little small management things and little small things that change during the instruction, but they're totally intertwined with each other and can help make his classroom a lot more effective. Overall, when I look at this video, I'm really encouraged by what this guy is doing in his classroom. I think that it's really powerful for him to say that, hey, I could have just been a good talker and got my degree and moved on, but I want to have stake in the game and kind of go into education. I think it really is a civil rights issue of our time. It really is something that we need to look into, that all students have access to this. And obviously, a lot of students in that environment are coming from homes where they're not supported, where they have personal issues going on. They're bringing all those things into the classroom. But we need to say it doesn't matter. Like, I always say, you can feel bad for students, but don't pity students. I feel bad for my students who bring in these things, but I don't pity them. I still have high expectations. I still know where I want them to go. And, this guy kind of really upheld that for me, and I was really encouraged by that.